Hi everyone, welcome to Science Breakdown, where I deep dive into a scientific announcement, pull apart the original research to figure out if it's an actual breakthrough or just fancy clickbait. Today I will talk about this tweet that concerns millions of people throughout the world. A novel insulin that you can inject only once a week and would still modulate the diabetes to prevent hypo and hyperglycemias. What they are talking about is a novel technology, or more accurately, a bunch of new and less new ideas regrouped under the name GRI for glucose responsive insulin, which is a very bad name because GRI already stands for glycemia risk index, which is also linked to diabetes. So the concept of glucose responsive insulin is that the insulin itself is wrapped into something that allows the insulin to be active when the blood sugar is up or high and stay inactive in the body when the blood sugar is low. To my great dismay, the Guardian article that explains it does not cite either its sources nor the scientists that actually worked on it, which made my research incredibly difficult. So as I was researching, I found a quite interesting paper that I will talk about in the next video. Then what I found was a Novo Nordisk clinical trial that was testing a 1 week long injection, but actually it was to replace the long-acting injection that you take once a day, or Lantus, for those who are familiar with it, and you still needed to supplement it with at least one or two rapid injection with meals. So not fully replacing injection with a once a week one at all. Another paper, which is most likely the one that The Guardian was mentioning, explain that they have synthesized a glucose responsive insulin that they tested both in mice and mini pigs, and that would allow for a normal blood sugar for at least 7 days. Not gonna lie, as a diabetic myself, this got me pretty excited. So they tested in 5 mice, and indeed, on average, the blood sugar stayed under 200 milligram per deciliter. Um, I put this threshold of 200 in a purple line, and this corresponds to 11.1 for mole users. And those blood sugars staying under 200 lasted for 7 days. And I put the box around the 7 day period so you can see exactly where it is. You can see that the average is represented by those blue dots. And even though this average stayed under 200 for the entire 7 day period, some mouse had a much lower or much higher blood sugar. And you can see that with the standard deviation line that represents variation. Regarding hypoglycemia, they noticed that only 1 out of the 5 mice experienced one hypoglycemic episode about 24 hours after injection, but without really knowing what was the activity of the mice or having more replicates, it's kind of hard to see how that would translate to very active or stressed humans. You can also see that even though the blood sugar was very fine the first 7 days, it got quite high after 7 days, so between 7 and 16 days of treatment, which was expected. But what was quite unexpected was that after 17 days, it went back to about 200, and this was not explained by the paper, and this is still not very much understood. Then they tried to inject glucose directly into the mice to see if the blood sugar would come down by itself. And even though they saw that the effect of the insulin was diminished throughout the days, it still went back to normal after 30 minutes on day 2 and 50 minutes on day 6. One thing worth noting is that even though those peaks of high blood sugar, they are quite short, they are still fairly high, about 300 on day 2 and 400, that is 22.2, at day 6, with which most diabetologists would probably be displeased by. Then they tested the insulin complex on mini pigs, which have a much closer physiology to humans, which is great. And also they could be wearing glucose monitor, which is pretty good to see the variation throughout the day without having to test the blood sugar manually. And they tested it on 3 pigs, and the results are not very replicable, in the sense that pig 1 was able to keep its blood sugar almost completely under 200 for the whole 7 days period, whereas pig 2 and 3 had a much higher blood sugar, and pig 3 didn't even go back under 200 for most of the treatment after day 3. So one reason for that could be that when they induced the diabetes in the pigs, pig 2 and 3 had overall a much higher blood sugar than pig 1. And now the question is, which one is more representative of a normal diabetic human? Because even though pigs 2 and 3 had overall even a higher concentration of their insulin complex, their blood sugar was not acceptable for any diabetic standards. They also did not make much mention of hypoglycemic events, but thanks to my trusty PowerPoint skills, I drew an orange line on this graph to represent the hypoglycemia of a pig, which is lower than in a human, about 40 or 2.2. And to me, it seems like the pig 1 did not have that many hypoglycemic events, or at least not severe ones, which is a very good thing. So to me, this paper looks really promising when you only look at the data that they have on mice. As soon as you go into the pigs, it really depends on which pig is representative of a human model, because if it's pig 1, then this is an amazing proof of concept. Whereas if it's pigs 2 or 3, their insulin is really not active for as long as they claim. Overall, I have two takeaways for this episode. The first one is that those scientific newsletters like The Guardian really need to start citing their sources, because right now I'm not even sure if I talked about the same papers that they were mentioning. And it does not allow people to go back to the original study and make an unbiased opinion for themselves. And second, for this technology, I would say that for now it is still too soon to claim it a huge breakthrough. The second paper that I was mentioning is really amazing as long as you look at mice, but it would need a lot more studies to make sure that it can still be applicable to humans. Thank you very much. This was Science Breakdown. I hope you stick around and I hope you stay curious.